Just to get my nerd on, I'd say 100% of relationships, before any age, end. Sometimes in death. To answer this, I'm going to guess a bit that you mean, is it true that 90% of romantic partnerships, married or unmarried, started before the age of 30, end at some stage, in a way other than death? Well, it's entirely feasible. I can't say for sure, but it doesn't sound at all drastic. Wherever you heard it from, it's kind of a useless statistical statement. Those relationships might end after 1 week, 3 months, 2 years, or 40 years. It's not really saying a lot about relationship longevity. After all, someone could meet someone at 29, be together for another 40 years, yet still be together longer than a couple who met at 35, whose relationship ended with the death of one partner. Because the stat doesn't say whether it relates to marriage or de facto marriage or living separately relationships, it may be including people who are just dating yet committed exclusively, and finding out whether they want to get serious. A lot of those, going steady, relationships aren't serious and may end in weeks or less. Then there are the slightly more serious relationships after the initial, exclusive dating phase, where people know they really like the person, are no longer trying this out for a little while to see whether they want to stay together and not date other people, and are now pretty much committed and expecting if they are together long enough they might get engaged or live together. Does the statistic include polygamous relationships? Friendships? Maybe the stat refers to committed relationships, but as you can see from my previous remarks, there are many levels of commitment, but they are all legitimate forms of commitment. Commitment to exclusivity, for now, unless we find each other unsuitable or find someone better. Commitment to taking this more seriously to discover if we want to live together, etc. Without a clear definition of what the statistic regards as a relationship, it's impossible to say whether it's correct or realistic. We can only guess at what they mean. But none of this is earth-shattering. Our early years are times of experimentation, finding out who we are, how people operate, how the world works, what we want. There has to be a learning period, or no learning period. Just dive in and commit forever with no choice to leave, as it was in the old days. Pros and cons to both. And in the second option, not real fair if you're one of the many unlucky people trapped in a miserable or abusive relationship. We're also in a transitional period, where older people are from a generation that was raised with different moral or religious beliefs and associates with similar people, and are more conditioned therefore to stay no matter what. The fact they're still together doesn't mean their relationships or situations are better. I know plenty of older generation people who have stuck it out in nightmare abusive marriages, and outsiders compliment them on their successful marriages, like their anniversary milestones or a relationship high score. They're not. In many cases, they're a badge of stupidity, or fear and unnecessary suffering, weighed down by social pressure. These long-suffering commitments are no more than secret relationship failures, and will account for bringing down the breakup percentage stats in the older generation. Still, among that generation, are the people who took their vows seriously, who chose the right partner, carefully, who are suited, who meant, till death do us part, and were realistic, or who learned to be realistic, about the work involved in maintaining a relationship for a lifetime, and being the best partner they can be to make that happen. That is something lost on a lot of people these days. Even people currently in the 40 to 60 age range, who reached adulthood in the late 70s and 80s, have had many relationship failures, and been married 2 times or more by the time they are 40. Very common. I don't know if it's even accurate to call ended relationships failures, their learning experiences. Usually, those people shouldn't be together, and splitting is a good thing. I do think it's good for people to take their commitments to marriage more seriously. Not necessarily that we should make it more difficult to divorce, but perhaps, in a sense, more difficult to marry. Not saying people should be prevented from marrying, but counseled beforehand in such a way that they examine their reasoning behind wanting to marry or cohabitate, and have less focus on the wedding, reception and trappings of the big day. Being married shouldn't be regarded as a status or ego achievement, or an indication of a person's desirability, or a moment for attention or something we just do because that's what everyone does, which can distract from the real true serious personal commitment people are making. So yeah, I wouldn't think it unrealistic or surprising if 90% of relationships before 30 ended at some stage, especially since this might also include teenage relationships. It's hardly a shocking statistic. And not necessarily a bad one, depending again, on relationship definition. I also wouldn't be surprised to see a similar percentage applies to older age groups. To put in perspective, starting from my teenage years, I had about 8 exclusive relationships before meeting my current husband at age 30. My first was at age 15. The shortest relationship was 2 months, and the longest about 3 years.